So we're going to have a look at how to create this scene. So I'm going to close this scene. I'm going to go to File, Browse in Bridge. And that's going to open up Bridge in the background. Now I've given you a folder of images. So if you find that folder, you should be able to see all the images here. And I've selected this one, and this one. And you do that by holding down the Control key when you click on them. And we're going to select this one as well. So Control, so select that one, hold down Control, click on the other ones that you want. We'll maybe bring in the moon as well. And then I'm going to go to Tools, Photoshop, Load Files into Photoshop Layers. And that's going to make a Photoshop file with all the layers in place for you. Okay, so what we're going to do first of all is just crop the image down a little bit. It's a little bit too big. Now there's an option here for delete cropped pixels. What we're going to do is switch that off so that when I delete the edges, it's still going to keep the green areas around here and I can use them in the image. So I'm going to turn that off and then crop the image to the size that I want it to be. And then click on the tick so that I've got my cropped image. Now you'll notice that the layers are in the order that you see here. So if I drag the forest above, it's in front of the avenue. I'm going to drag the forest underneath the avenue. And I want to reveal the forest behind the avenue layer. So I'm going to select the avenue layer. Now we're going to have a look at layer masks later, but for now we're just going to use the eraser tool. And I'm going to choose a nice soft brush. Make sure you got a soft brush from here. I'm also going to bring the opacity down to about 50%. Now if you've got a Wacom pen, you can use pressure sensitivity to control the opacity. But if you don't have a Wacom pen, just adjusting the opacity means that you can create these soft edges. And I can gradually build up the areas in the middle. So what I'm going to do is go around the edges first, just creating a nice soft edge. Just small little clicks. I can make my brush smaller if I want to have areas coming in. And then once I've gone around the edge, I can make my brush bigger and go up to 100% opacity. And that's going to get rid of those pixels so that we can see that nice green area underneath. Now, because we didn't crop this one, we can move it around. At the moment, it looks like there's a great big hole in the floor, which we don't really want. You might want that, but it's not what I want here. So what I'm going to do is select this layer and move it. And I do that using the Move tool. If I wanted a hole, I could just do that, and now I've got a great big hole. Could have a monster coming out of the hole or something. But I'm going to drag it over here. I can also scale it if I think it's a bit too big. I can scale it down, and if I hold down Alt, it will scale it from the center. So I'm just adjusting it till it looks right. So I think I want something like that, maybe. Okay, once that's where I want it, click on the tick button again. Okay, I now need to match the colours. So with that layer selected, I'm going to go to Image, Adjustments, Match Colour. Now at the moment, it's not taking the colour from anywhere, so we need to say where we're taking the colour from. We're taking it from Untitled 1, which is the name of this document, and we're going to choose the layer that we want to take the colour from, the forest. Oops, that's the wrong layer. It should be the avenue. And you'll see that it takes colours from the avenue layer and applies it to this layer, making it much easier for it to blend in with the background. And there's various different tools that you can use up here to adjust it. I could bring the luminance down if I think it's too bright. I can make the colours more intense or less intense by dragging on this one. Once I'm happy with it, click OK. and then we'll move on to the next layer. Now there are things we can do to make this look a little bit better, but we're going to do that in another lesson, so we'll leave that for now. What we're going to do now is get the mushrooms and put them on top of this layer, so it looks like they're sitting in the foreground. So I'm going to drag the mushrooms up to the top. They're a little bit too big, so I'm going to start by scaling them down, again holding down Alt to scale from the centre. And I'm going to move them to where I want them to be. So I want them to be in the foreground, sort of around about, maybe about here. Still a little bit too big, so I'm going to scale them down a little bit further. I think that will do. And I need a way to get rid of the background. So I'm going to choose the quick selection tool. Now you could use the quick selection tool, or you could use the lasso tool. I'll show you the magnetic lasso tool because that's very easy for this. You can just click and drag around there, and you'll notice that the selection sticks to the edge of the mushrooms. Now that works where there's a lot of contrast between the edge and the foreground. There are some things where it doesn't work so well, so we'll have a look at some other tools that you can use later as an alternative, but that works quite well here. So what we're going to do is go to Invert Selection, so that we're selecting everything except the mushrooms, and then we just hit backspace and that will delete everything except those mushrooms on that layer. Then we go to Deselect, with the layer still selected, go to Image, Adjustments, Match Colour. And we're going to do the same again, choose Untitled, Avenue, and then we can maybe fade the effect so that some of the colour from the mushrooms is coming back. And maybe adjust the luminance as well, brighten them up a little bit because they're in the foreground. So that way we've got a little bit of the colour coming through, but we've still got a bit of brightness from the original. And then I'll click OK. Now this edge here isn't right, so I'm going to go back to my eraser tool with a soft edge, and I'm just going to soften that so that we don't see that edge. And we'll do the same at this side here. Okay, so the mushrooms are now in the foreground. I might move them off to the side slightly. So around about there. I should possibly have darkened them down a little bit more, but we'll leave that for now. And then we're going to bring in the tree. So we're going to use this tree in the foreground. We're going to make it big enough first of all, so I'm going to just scale it up a little bit. You can scale up a little bit, you don't want to go too much. That's about 135%, so we should be okay with that. I'm going to click OK. And then to get rid of the background, what I'm going to do is use the quick selection tool. This lets me be a bit more accurate than with the magnetic lasso tool. So all I need to do is just click over the areas that I want to keep. Now don't worry if it selects other areas that you don't want. I'll show you how you can get rid of those in a sec. So I'm just first of all adding all the areas that I want. Then I can go over it and decide on the areas that I don't want. So I switch to the minus tool to remove those areas. So I don't want this area here. I want that area, so I need to go back to the plus tool. Now instead of just going back and forwards up here, when you've got the plus tool selected, if you hold down Alt, it will change to the minus tool. So it means that you can just keep one tool selected, add bits and remove bits. Okay, and once you've got it almost perfect, what you want to do is click on Select and Mask. And what that will do is it will switch off the background so that you can see the edges a bit more carefully. Now it's placed it on a black background, and you control that over here in the view mode, so you could choose to have it on white, on black, and then you've got a slider here so that you can see the background coming through if you want to. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose the minus tool, make my brush a bit bigger, and it just allows me to go in here and fix any of these dodgy edges. So just by painting I can remove some of these nasty edges. Now over here you've got settings for edge detection. If I put that on, it will look for an edge and it will try and make that edge a bit nicer. You can adjust things like the smoothness of the edge if you want to smooth it out a little bit. You can remove edge colours. If you're seeing some kind of white pixels on the edge, it will remove them. And then you can just say new layer with layer mask. Click OK, and you'll see that you've now got your tree composited onto the background. Now I'm going to move that underneath the mushroom layer. I'm going to delete that one because we've got a spare one there. So I drag it onto the bin icon just to delete it. Okay, so let me save this. So I'm going to save it to my computer. Okay, now the next step that I'll show you is how to colour correct different layers, or how to colour correct the whole thing. Now if I add one of these effects down here, so say I want to darken down the tree, I can click on here and I can access things like hue, saturation, brightness and contrast. So if I want to darken the tree, choose brightness and contrast, and then I can just darken it down, increase the contrast or decrease contrast if I prefer. And you'll notice that it's working on everything except the mushrooms. And that's because it's on a separate layer. So you'll notice that I can turn that layer on and off. And you'll notice that it's applied to every layer underneath it. If I drag that above the mushrooms, it's now applied to the mushrooms as well. Now let me just close this so that we can have a look. Now, if you want to, if you only want it applied to the tree layer but not the layers behind it, if you double click it, it will open up the controls, and if you click on this button here, it will only apply it to the layer directly underneath it. So now it's only being applied to this tree. So when I make changes to it, it's only the tree that's being affected. So that way I can try and match it in with the scene. So the other thing that you might want to do is add an adjustment layer to colour everything. So if I select the mushroom, go to my adjustments menu, which is this one here. Now there's a few different colour effects that you can add. You could add something like just a photo filter, which allows you to add just a warming look or a cooling look to the scene. And you can adjust the density of that. So these are just filters that allow you to add different colours to your scene. Okay, and it applies it as a separate layer. I can turn that off if I don't like it, and I could add, maybe if I want a stronger look, a hue saturation adjustment layer. And that allows me to change the colours more dramatically. So if I wanted it to be a nighttime scene, I'll drag that to blue, either that way or that way. Either way will go to blue. This way will drag more towards purples and then blue. This one will go more towards kind of turquoises than blue. And we're going to drag the darkness down and the saturation up. Okay, and you'll notice it's applied to every layer underneath it. Again, if I click on this button, it will only be applied to the layer underneath it. Now at the moment, that's this layer, so it's not going to have any effect. But we want it applied to everything. Now, you might not want it as strong as that, so you've got your opacity values here, which you could drag up or down. You can also use blending modes to determine how it blends with the layers underneath, and each of these will give you a different result. So by using the blending modes in combination with the opacity, you can really tweak how that affects your image. Okay, so let's choose quite like that one actually. Now you can still go back and adjust the colour as well, so if you wanted it more towards the blues, you might want to kind of just go and tweak that a little bit, adjust the saturation value. actually the reds are looking really nice. You've got the lightness settings there. Okay, so just have a play with these adjustments and see what kind of colour treatments that you can come up with. You can save 2 or 3 versions, so you could save this as woodland scene reds. And then we could do like a blue version that's maybe back with just normal mode and just the opacity down a little bit, and save that as blues. And then next week we'll look at how to composite a figure in here and make it look more like a drawing.